And everybody, this is Coco. So I'm here for my porch in Puerto Plata, and I want to create this video about who Coco is or who I am. And I was really self-reflecting on like how could I actually introduce myself to y'all and how I could express who I am in an authentic way, in a way that speaks to the vibe I want to project. And I came across the idea of sharing who Coco is through food, something that I really deeply love. I would die without it. I mean, come on, that's a strong love right there. But anyways, so this video is going to be about who Coco is via cuisine, cooking, food, and how I've come to love different types of food through travel, how I've come to grow as a person, how I've become more healthy and have benefited from food. And just from learning how other people around the world create, grow, and cook the food that they eat. It's a beautiful thing. I guess the story starts off in Texas, because that's where I'm from originally. I'm actually indigenous to Texas, Native American, and I grew up in a household that produced a blend of Mexican American food and Tejano food. And I think it's important to really distinguish the two. To be a Tejano is to be essentially indigenous to Texas, to be a Native American to Texas, right? There's a lot of people who confuse and often equate the two, saying that a Tejano is a Mexican American or a Mexican, and they are not the same. They are three different cultures, three different types of people, right? So my mother is Mexican American. She has family in Mexico and it comes from that background. My father is a Tejano. His family has always lived in the region that we call Texas today, even before it was even called Texas as the way we call it today, before it was part of the United States and so forth, right? And there's this beautiful blend of culture that exists today in Texas, right? And it's a very, very large culture, but it's often unrepresented in media. It's often misrepresented, right? People often think, oh, you're a Texas Mexican, you're, the food Tex-Mex and all these things. We have created a huge impact in the world, because no matter where I go in the world, even here in the Dominican Republic, you can find Tex-Mex food, right? You can find people making food that comes from where I am from, right? But the representation of Tex-Mex internationally and even outside of the region is very misrepresented. It's not the same quality. When you go to San Antonio, for an example, or to the Valley area or any part of Texas, and you eat like a real home-cooked meal that was made by the hands of someone who is Tejano, like the difference in quality is just remarkable, right? The tortilla is much more fluffy, it's much more homemade, right? It's a homemade tortilla you process with your hand, not something that comes out of a plastic bag. And it's not this thin plastic looking piece of bread. It's a work of art, really. But anyways, I'm kind of getting off on a tangent. So my first experience with food was when I was a young little boy. I grew up in a very poor family. My father was essentially incarcerated my entire life. I never really knew him, and the parts of him I did know are parts that I don't ever wish to have in my life, right? He wasn't the best person, and definitely a role model of what not to be in my life. My mother was very hardworking. She had to survive supporting 3 kids on her own when I was little, before she got married. And so at the time, she had at times 3 jobs, right? She was just super busy working, just trying to create a household that had food, just trying to create something for us, a semblance of what life really was like. And while she was working, obviously she couldn't be home cooking and doing other things. So I, as the oldest child, took up that mantle. I, for the most part, started cooking, and I started loving the idea of creating something from scratch and doing it in a way that made my taste buds dance, right? And so I really fell in love with the idea of cooking as a young child. Fast forward a few years, I'm 18 years old. I moved to Argentina, studying abroad. And while living in Argentina, I come across an entirely different world of food, right? My perspective of Latin America was very limited at the time. Like, as I feel most Americans have a very limited representation of what it is to be a Latin American because it's such a vastly diverse region, right? In Argentina, the culture, the main host culture that exists there is more Eurocentric. You know, most of the immigrants that came from Europe to the United States, also some of them came to Argentina. And so you can really see it in the cuisine, you can see it in the people, you can see it in the music and everything, right? You go to Buenos Aires and it's almost like another European city or an American city if America was part of Latin America. The food itself is also reminiscent of that, the taste and everything and so forth. So a quick example, the main staple dish in Argentina is the asada, or the grilled meat buffet in a way, right? Beef in Argentina is amongst the highest quality beef in the world. They really cherish the production of beef in the country, and they really celebrate that, right? Because of this Eurocentric food palette, they don't necessarily put too much seasoning or too much flavor that's not the beef itself on the asada. So when you're getting the beef, it's maybe seasoned with a little bit of salt on it and so forth. This difference in food palette, this difference in seasoning technique and flavor combination really transformed my expectations for what it meant to eat food in a way that I didn't realize was really beneficial to me until much later in life. But the main point I'm trying to make here is when I was in Argentina, I consumed far less salt than I did in Texas. In Texas, you know, everything from our candies all the way down to the food itself is very salty. Case in point, try getting like a mango nata or trying getting some chamoy and seeing if you can't pucker up because it's so salty. And so my entire diet was just, as a kid, used to all this salt. And it was really impacting my health in a very negative way. I always had high blood pressure, as an example, right? Hypertension. As a kid, that's it's just outrageous, right? And so being here and consuming far less salt and other ingredients allowed me to really understand what it meant to have a more balanced diet and approach regarding salt and other processed foods. I was noticing that I was eating less processed foods, more natural foods, and so forth. But it was still not enough to really benefit my health entirely, right? It helped a lot, but I still needed a lot of work. And then I moved to the Dominican Republic years later. And in the Dominican Republic, while they did use a lot more salt in their food, they also use a lot of different ingredients from their cultural background, right? If Argentina was more Eurocentric, the Dominican Republic definitely had a stronger African presence in it. There's a larger African diaspora culture that is existing in the Dominican Republic as part of the Caribbean. And because of that, you see the ingredients that they use in their foods come from that sort of immigration movement is not the right word, that diasporic movement, right? And so basically, you know, for example, right, when I first arrived in the Dominican Republic, I was given a plate of what we call los tres golpes, which is a fried egg, fried cheese, and some mangú, which is a mashed green plantain or a mashed green banana. And the mangú was pretty different for me. I never had a green banana or a green plantain as a dish before, so I didn't really know what to expect. And at first, when I would eat the green bananas and the green plantains, especially when they were just boiled and whole, it was definitely very different for me to really comprehend and appreciate at first. But over time, it really became enamored with the ingredient itself. You see, the green banana or the green plantain, when it's not ripened, is very starchy, just like a potato. So you can essentially replace it for any potato-based dish, all the way down to the French fry, right? However, the banana has, in my opinion, just from the way I feel when I eat it, it has more soluble fiber in it. Meaning, when I consume those green bananas or green plantains, I feel so much more full, right? So much more full, and that's such a great thing to feel when you're trying to reduce the amount of food you're consuming. And so it helped me not only just reduce the amount of sodium from Argentina, this diet helped me reduce the amount of food I'm consuming overall. So, I mean, I still eat a lot of food, don't get me wrong, but because I'm eating these tubers or these starchy vegetables or fruits, it's allowing me to consume far less fatty dishes or fatty foods than I did before, right? And in addition to that, because it's a more developing country and not everywhere has air conditioning, for example, right now in my apartment, I don't have air conditioning. I mean, I do in my bedroom, which I use at nighttime, but during the day, I'm out in the full heat, right? Right now, and I mean, it feels good right now. You know, it's in the 80s, 90s, so forth. But because I'm in this climate and I'm consistently hot, my body can consume a little bit more salt than normal because I'm needing to replenish it, right? And so that change in lifestyle, in addition to the change in diet, has allowed me to become far healthier than I ever could imagine possible beforehand, right? And this is probably something we can learn in Texas as well. You know, I feel like in the United States and in Texas, we use far too much energy. And don't get me wrong, I love my air conditioning. But I can guarantee you, if we lived without it just a little bit, right, during the daytime, we would be a lot healthier just because of the heat itself. That may be a revolutionary thing to say, but that's my opinion on it. All right. And it kind of another thing I've been reflecting on is why our foods are the way they are, right? Why we produce these foods, and for example, why are foods in Texas so salty, right? And in other very hot climate locations and cultures, the foods are usually a little more salty than the cultures that exist in colder climates. And I've come to the understanding, and this is just my own idea and perspective of this thought, is that in the hotter climates in the past, before air conditioning existed, we had to have more salt in our food in order to replenish that mineral, which is a vital mineral that we need, right? And so in Texas, you know, being a very hot climate state, in the past, it was that actually a very good thing to eat a lot of salt, right? Now that we live in an air-conditioned environment 24/7, that probably needs to change, right? And we need to adapt to our new environment. But, you know, that's my take on the saltiness of foods and why cultures have so much salt in some of their dishes. Same thing goes for spicy food and perhaps preservation or salt and preservation, right? People use salt to preserve their foods, and they did that in the past, right? Another thing that really I've been thinking about is my own body, right? And how it feels when I consume things. And so one thing that's really I've been really thinking about is what did my ancestors do in the past that I'm not doing now in a more modern sedentary lifestyle? Well, in the past, my ancestors were semi-nomadic, meaning they would travel from settlement to settlement and live their lives that way. And so they were consistently moving their bodies, right? And so I realized that in this modern lifestyle, we're eating the same foods perhaps that our ancestors did, or foods that are similar to the foods they ate, but we're doing so at a more rich, we're doing so in versions of those dishes that are much more rich, much more fat and protein based than in the past. And second, we're not moving as much, we're not sweating as much. because we're living in a more sedentary lifestyle where most of the things that in the past we had to do for work are now automized, right? They're now just automatic processes, and it's much more simple, right? It's a much more easy lifestyle. And so these are things that I've been really reflecting on and considering as I improve the way I cook my food, as I approach the way I prepare my food and so forth, so that it's coming from a place of awareness and understanding, and do so in a way that is conscious of the food. And what I hope to do in the future, a long time from now, is to create a museum of food. I guess you could say a museum, a restaurant in Texas, perhaps, that will share like very traditional Texas dishes, right? And I'm talking about like the Hano Texas dishes, and prepare them in those very traditional ways, and to really educate the community and whoever is interested in preparing food that is not only sourced locally or even produced by our own staff in our own restaurant, but food that is prepared in a way that really sustains our culture. And a quick example of what I'm talking about is this, right? And if you go to San Antonio, for example, one of the main traditions in the city is to eat barbacoa on a Sunday. So barbacoa traditionally is cooked using pieces of a cow, if not the entire cow, if you're a wealthy person, but pieces of cow or like beef, and you would wrap them up in agave leaves, and you would place them in a pit, earthen pit, and you would allow them to essentially roast and smoke overnight, right? Today we mainly use the cachete or the beef cheek, right? But it can be any type of meat, right? Barbacoa is actually the manner of cooking. It's not necessarily the dish itself. We just call the dish barbacoa now, but it's the manner of cooking, right? And so what I want to do in the future is I want to dig up a huge pit in the ground, of course put down some bricks around it, and then I want to be able to prepare these foods in those traditional ways, to be able to share to the community and to Texas that true cultural value. And for a lot of people who don't realize this, when we cook in a barbecue pit today, a Texas barbecue pit, when you're smoking things, the original barbecue pit was a real actual pit underground or in the ground. And that's something that we've lost in this cultural assimilation process that colonization has enacted on us, but something I hope to really revive and share with the world in the future. But anyways, that is Coco. That is who I am through cooking, right? I don't know if y'all enjoyed it, but I hope y'all did. Please subscribe. Please, support this channel. We just started. I'm still kind of learning all the lingo and all this good stuff, but I'm here, and I'm gonna be here to share my perspective of the world, to share my tips on traveling, maybe some stories that I have, talk about love, talk about dancing, music, art, food, all the good stuff. I'm also a father, so I can talk about fatherhood and how to be like a man that is here and living to construct a thing in a positive way, a life, right? And a man who is trying to be conscious, right, and trying to be supportive and strong in a way that isn't toxic or in a way that isn't destructive to oneself, right? And I feel like that's something that our society needs more and more now, as we are coming on this time of disruption, right? And yeah, that's basically who I am. It's Coco. Peace.